Hello? Okay, we're ready. So, good morning, everybody. Um, Thank you for being with us here. Yeah, I just don't want to move it because she fixed it for it's okay. And we're here to have a special edition today of the Gospel in English, right? We usually have it at the last Sunday of every month, and this time we're going to have on the first Sunday of the month because we have a special guest that I will introduce in a minute. And let's start with a reading that I took from the Gospel according to Spiritism from Apostle Paul. I'm going to read just part of it, okay? Without charity, there's no salvation. My children, in the maxim, without charity, there's no salvation, are contained the destinies of men and women on earth and in heaven. On earth, because in the shadow of this banner they will live in peace. In heaven, because those who have practiced it will find grace before the Lord. This motto is the heavenly light, the luminous pillar that guides them through the desert of life in order to lead them to the promised land. It shines in heaven like a saintly halo around the brows of the elect, and on earth, it's engraved on the hearts of those to whom Jesus will say, "Go to the right, you who are blessed of my Father." You will recognize them by the fragrance of charity that they spread around them. Nothing better expresses Jesus' thought, nothing better sums up the duties of men and women than this maxim of divine order. Spiritism could not prove its origin in any better way than by providing it as a rule, because it is the reflection of the purest Christianity. With such a guide, people will never become lost. So, my friends, apply yourselves to grasping its profound meaning and consequences, and to discovering for yourselves all its applications. So we will stop here today, and let's make a quick prayer to open this session. So, closing our eyes and getting our breathing in a good cadence, focusing our energies and vibrations to the divine, being thankful for being here today, for having Jesus and God as our north, and having all these good spirits, these spirits of light, helping us find the way day after day after day. We ask you, Lord, to give us the blessing of your protection, your enlightenment during this session. And we hope that we all walk out of here today with a new lesson, with something new that we learn towards your path. So be it. So, as I mentioned, we have a special edition of the Gospel in English this month because we have a special guest who is Beatriz Lopes. Beatriz is visiting us from Connecticut, and she has, although very young age, a vast curriculum as a spiritist. So I'm gonna, just tell about her a little bit. Beatriz is currently the Family, Youth, and Children's Spiritist Education Director for the United States Spiritism Federation. She is a representative of the U.S. within the International Spiritist Council Youth Committee. Being a Spiritist since childhood, Bea had the remarkable opportunity to represent Spiritism globally at the United Nations at the age of 16. Since then, Bea has actively taken on various roles within the Spiritist community, from leading study groups to delivering lectures and organizing events like the annual Spiritist Youth Retreat in Connecticut, which I had the privilege to participate once. And she is a big leader of that event, so it's a pleasure to have her here. So before I give the stage to her, I just would like to remind everyone that on the Gospel in English, we usually have a collective pass, not individual pass as we have on the main talk at 11:30. Okay? So without further ado, please, Bea.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today and for joining us early in the morning. So today's lecture, I'm really excited to bring this to you all because when this topic came up, Stephanie invited me to do a youth workshop and then also a lecture, and this topic of charity. And this lecture actually ended up really meaning a lot to me because for those of you who don't know, my mom also gives lectures, but she does them in Portuguese. But it's always been really nice because we can always collaborate together. So whenever I have a lecture coming up, I ask her like, oh, what do you have any ideas of like material that can go into this lecture? And when I brought to her this topic, she said, oh my God, I'm doing a lecture on charity too. So she had just gotten invited for a totally different lecture, but on the topic of charity. So this was really nice because we actually got to do it completely together. So this is the first time that we fully made a lecture together with the same material, and it became a really special project for us. This is also really special because yesterday we had a wonderful youth workshop and also on the topic of charity. And I was wondering, what should I bring to talk to them? And I said, you know what? Let me bring some of the same material that we're talking about now to the youth. And so we brought the same examples and stories in a smaller version, but it's important that this connection between what our youth are learning and what us are learning, because these lessons are universal to all of us, so it's important for all ages. So I really enjoyed being able to bring this to the youth yesterday and also now presenting it. And so to start off this lecture, I have this message here given by Chico Xavier through the Spirit by the Spirit Emmanuel. And he says, observe the generosity of divine blessings everywhere. While man rations the distribution of this or that resource, God does not alter his laws of abundance. So all around us, we can see all the divine blessings that are constantly there. And, right, like it's saying here, we humans, we ration out how much we're going to give. Oh, I can't give any more because I already gave to this person. Oh, I can't do more because I already did this. We ration out our giving. But when we look at God doesn't alter this. All of us are giving these blessings in abundance. And the message continues and says, notice on earth around you the magnificent sun nurturing life in all directions, the pure, immeasurable air, the spring that gives itself without reservation. So all of these pieces of all of these aspects of nature that are abundantly available to us. No matter who you are, what situation you are in, we all have the sun shining on us. We all have air, have access to this flowing water. So it's incredible to see that in God's law, he's giving in abundance. He's giving to all equally, and we all have that to get. But as I mentioned, we tend to close that down. We tend to hold, I can only give so much. But it's incredible to see how much that God gives to us in an immeasurable amount. And when we take a moment to reflect on that divine beauty of what's around us and everything nature provides, you already start to feel that warmth, that joy, as if the sun was shining on us now. Everything infinitely granted to all, everything generously shared. So everything, right? Everything shared and infinitely granted, and it's incredible to think about because that's not how we work. We can't infinitely give, but how do we get close to that? And what's interesting, the message continues, is what happens with the Lord's material gifts also occurs in the realm of the Spirit. The doors of wisdom and love are constantly open. So while we're given all this nature in abundance all around us, so is this is happening in the spiritual realm as well, with the wisdom, the love, the guidance that we're constantly receiving. So no matter who we are, like the sun shines on all of us, so does the guidance that we have, our spiritual guidance that we can always tap into, our inner self that we always have with us no matter what situation we're in. However, from the river of life's blessings, each soul only withdraws the portion of riches it can perceive and use effectively. So all of us is all of these things, nature, our spiritual well-being, this is all readily available to us in abundance all the time. But what are we taking from it, right? We have these things, but we're not taking advantage of it. We're not getting as much as we can. So it's impactful to think about this comparison that while everything is given, all of this abundance, we're not actually practicing that. We're not getting the use of all of that stuff that's given to us. So it's important for us to reflect with all of this that we have, no matter who you are, where you're at, what are we making good use of? What might we be disregarding that we could be making good use of? And what are we doing for our own personal growth towards the good? And to help us reflect on these questions today, I brought a story from the book Diversity of Charisms, and the story of Regina. And this story, I think, will help us reflect on what true charity means and how we can make the most of that abundance that's given to us. While it might not seem like it's an abundance, while it might not seem like we have it all, we can make the most of it. And so this story is a true story about a woman named Regina. It's a fake name that they use to not disclose her information, but it's a true story of this woman in Brazil. And she was very involved in the Spiritist Center. She was doing, helping a lot there, but she said, you know what, I really want to expand what I'm doing for the community, and I want to do some material charity. I want to get more involved, and she felt a gap in her life in that aspect, and she really wanted to fill that with giving back. And so she's trying to give back, get more involved in the community, but she's not really sure what that means yet. And one day, she has a dream, and the dream is so vivid, so real to her. And she's standing there outside and it's raining. There's a cold, fine rain happening. It's nighttime, it's dark, and she's just in the middle of the street, and it's raining, and she's, all of a sudden, she hears crying of a baby. And so she hears this crying, and she starts looking for, oh my God, where is this baby that's crying? And so she starts following the crying. She follows it, and ends up finding a baby in the grass outside, like behind a shed. She finds a baby cold, naked, in this rain, in this cold. And so she immediately picks that baby up, gives her warmth to it, and says, I have to do something about this. So still in this dream, she goes inside the nearest house, gets a bath going with warm water, feeds the child, clothes the child, and she was giving all her love. But in that moment, she thought, okay, but what do I do now? What do I do with this child that I just found? And then she wakes up from that dream. And she wakes up from that dream, but it felt so realistic that she kept thinking about that. That kept weighing on her conscience of, what does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this? And she quite literally thought she was supposed to maybe adopt a baby was going to be on the street. So she is looking now everywhere in her life. She's looking around for a baby on the street. Like, she's looking at alleyways, and any time that it was a day that it was cold and raining again, she felt that sensation of like, I'm supposed to be doing something. And it was, almost haunting her, this idea of like, what am I supposed to do? Where is this child? To the point that even her friends and family, she had told them about this mission that she's looking for this child, keep an eye out for this child, because she felt like there's something that I need to do with this child. And a year goes by and nothing. no child appears. No one heard of any child outside. So she's really still torn on what did that mean and what am I supposed to be doing with that? And then one day, as her friend is pregnant, she decides to work together with her friend to make a laylet. And a laylet is a set of baby clothing, diaper, and necessities that the child needs for the first few months, year of their lives. And usually, mothers create this for themselves. So as they're pregnant, they start creating this so that once they have a child, they have all the necessary items they need. And so she starts helping her friend create this laylet because her friend is pregnant. And she realizes, you know what? We should make these laylets for other people, for needy mothers. And so she does exactly that. She turns to her friend and said, we should start making these for people in need. And that's exactly what she does. And now that she has this new idea, she realizes this is what I was supposed to do. This is what, suddenly it all made sense to her. It wasn't to take care of one specific child, but to help many. And by doing this small act of kindness that we will see has such a lasting impact on the people that she helps. But of course, as she's doing this, she starts getting some criticisms, some ideas, because people said, okay, you're making these beautiful laylets. They're taking a lot of time and money and materials to make, and they're beautiful. Why don't you sell them and then be able to have money to buy a lot more of these, to buy them, cheaper and buy a lot. And honestly, right, that sounds like, okay, that's a good idea. Let's do more. Let's get more of them going. Let's sell these. Let's have more money so we can keep buying and helping more people. And I think even I would think that. But no, Regina points out that people wrongly assume that most people believe that anything is good enough for the poor. And that, in a sense, is true, right? Because they're in such a position in their lives that they are forced to accept anything. They will accept anything. But it doesn't mean that anything is good enough for the poor, that we should give the minimum, that we should give the cheapest thing or trying to mass produce. And so she gives some counter arguments when people are coming to her saying, why don't you sell this? Why don't you do more? Why don't you give more? Why don't you give less? Because in these baskets she was creating, she was hand making these pieces that were over 50 pieces in a basket. So they said, why don't you just give a few and then you can give more people? But she countered that actually the poor mothers, they needed the better quality items. Because while the rich mothers had money to go and buy new things, if this one rips, I'll just buy a new one. So the poor mother doesn't have those resources. They need that one laylet to last them. They need that one laylet to be there for them because they're just going to use that same one over and over again. So actually, right, the needy mother needs that more, needs a high quality more so that it lasts longer. And she also counters that and says, also, no matter who you are, no matter if you're wealthy, middle class, poor, if you have nothing, you all want the best for your child. Just because a poor mother can't afford that, they want the best for their child. They want the best laylet. And why shouldn't they get that? So, in short, she continued making very well-crafted laylets. Taking her time on each of them and supporting as many families as she could. And it's interesting because when we look at the definition in the Cambridge Dictionary of charity, what's interesting is that if you ask the average person what is charity, they think about this. They think of help, especially in the form of money, given freely to people who are in need. So that piece right there, especially in the form of money, that really stands out to us because that's most of what we're thinking about. When we think of doing charity, we think of, okay, I give money. And when we think or material items, and we think in that regard, we realize that quantity does matter, right? Because then, okay, if it's about giving money, the more I give, the better I do. Or if it's about giving things, the more we give, the better we do. And that makes sense when we're looking at it through this lens of the physical goods that come with charity. But it's interesting because, as we all know, and actually it was interesting yesterday in the youth workshop, when I asked them what the definition of charity is, very few, I don't think anyone mentioned anything about money. Because think about youth. They don't have that money to give, right? So when they're thinking of charity, they're thinking of like, oh, I can help a friend. I can donate something like clothes, but they don't have the money to give. So they weren't even thinking that, which is really, was amazing to see that they weren't considering just the material things that they could give, but actually gave really great answers about helping a friend, asking someone if they're okay. Because really, right, what is charity all about? And so it's interesting, Kardec had the same question. He was having the same question when he was making the Spirits book, and he asked the Spirits in question 886, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? So it's interesting to see, right? Okay, we think we know what charity is, but what does it really mean, especially in how Jesus was understanding it? And the Spirits answered, benevolence towards everyone, indulgence towards the imperfection of others, and forgiveness for offenses. We see here that this definition has nothing to do with giving physical things, giving money. It is much more than that. It's kindness towards the other person. It's in allowing people to have their imperfections, understanding that, and forgiving them the same way that we want to be forgiven. And we see that, this is the true definition of charity as our role model, Jesus, showed us. It wasn't about giving things, right? Jesus wasn't giving things. He was being kind and loving to all. And when we see this definition, we see the importance of quality. It's not about the quantity that we are giving, but what's the quality of what we are giving, of what we are doing, and what is our intention, our meaning behind that. And so then Kardec adds his own comment to the end of this question, and he says, love and charity supplement the laws of justice, because loving our neighbor is to do them all the good possible, all that we would wish to be done to ourselves. Such is the meaning of Jesus' word, love one another as brothers. So it's so easy to say, right? To do them all the good possible. But how hard is it to actually do that? How hard is it to actually do all the good, right? To not judge someone at all, to be there for them. And, even in our families, which is the closest knit that we have, that we try our hardest to do that, even then sometimes it's tough, right? So, but that's what we're aiming for. That's what the true charity is doing all of this good with all of the kindness and love. And, right, in that, love one another as brothers. So it's a little easier within our family, but imagine expanding that beyond and loving anyone as a brother and doing all the good possible. And Kardec continues in his comment, and he says, charity, according to Jesus, is not restricted to almsgiving, but embraces all our relations with our fellow humans, whether in situations below, equal, or superior to our own. Those who are truly charitable seek to uplift the self-esteem of those in lower positions, thereby diminishing the distance between both. And I think this part of the comment really sums it all up, because one thing that's important that it mentions here is that it's not restricted to almsgiving, which means giving of material things, whether money, clothes, food. It's not restricted, but that is an important part of it, right? We can't deny that people would be helped by money and with food and with material goods. They do need that. So it's not that we're saying not to do that, right? That is an important part, but doing that with the love, with kindness, with charity in mind. And, being here for the past few days, I got to see your wonderful project of the food pantry. And in the food pantry, I saw exactly that it's, of course, giving material things, giving food because people need that. But the love and kindness that went behind it, you could see that it was giving families much more than just food. It's giving them the feeling that they are loved, they do matter, and that they are worth it. And it's also important here, right, that it's not just, it says here, in situations below, equal, or superior to our own. So it's not just about helping the one that has less than us, right? Sometimes we look at someone and we say, oh, well, they have everything. They have more than us, so we don't need to help them. But they're also, we know for a fact, right? They're also going through their own struggles, their own challenges. And maybe, they don't need the physical charity, but that's where a kind friend comes into play. That's where someone caring about them really matters in their lives. And truly charitable, those who are truly charitable seek to uplift the self-esteem of those in lower positions. So we are not only trying to, for someone to be able to come and ask for help, that means they're in a really vulnerable position. That means they're at a point in their life where they feel like they can't do it themselves, and it's really vulnerable to be able to say, I need help with this or that. So we don't want to put these people down who need help, right? We're about uplifting them, about making them feel like they matter, like there is help, there is love, and there is kindness. And of course, as Regina is saying with her laylettes about helping fewer families, but with these high quality materials, we can't help everyone, right? As physically on earth, we can't help everyone, but what can we do to help one person, to truly help them, to truly change their lives? And in the book, Regina mentions the Chinese phrase that says, it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. So maybe we can't do it all. We can't help everyone that we come across. We do, as the initial message said, right? We restrict our giving because we don't know yet how to just fully do good to everyone as we saw Jesus did. But what can we do to light that one candle, to help that one person, that one family have the resources and things they need? And so now the book about that tells the story of Regina, the book shares some stories of the impact that these laylettes had. And it's amazing to see this impact because it shows us the true meaning and impact of charity. It shows us that one simple act of kindness can make the world of a difference to someone. And so for the first story that they bring, this woman, and so Regina, she lived near the poor neighborhood, the slums, and so these cases really naturally started coming to her of people who needed help, of mothers who were pregnant who had nothing. And so they started naturally coming to her, and she would give these laylettes to whoever was in need. And what was really interesting is that a lot of places at the time that helped other people like this, they would ask the mother to prove their need, to prove that they didn't have things, to prove that the baby had no clothes, which again, in that point of that person's already in a vulnerable situation. And Regina understood it's not about that, right? I don't need to check and make the person feel worse that they don't have anything. No, give it to them. And what they're going to do with it, that's up to them. But she did her kindness by giving and lifting them up and not making them feel less than for not having certain resources. And so in this first story, Regina talks about a laylette that she gave. That was for a mother that was pregnant with her 9th child. She had 9 children, and their family really didn't have much. And her husband had lost his job, and because of that, they were living on very little means. Imagine supporting soon to be 9 children and not having anything. And because of that, the father started spending the little bit of money they had drinking. And he started developing a serious problem drinking, and the situation for the family felt hopeless. The wife felt completely hopeless of, what do I do, right? There's 9 children, a 9th child on the way, and we have nothing, and now he's in this state that he really is, almost making the situation worse, and now we really have nothing. And so when someone heard about this mother and brought her to Regina to give a laylet, Regina gave the laylet and, of course, didn't ask any questions, didn't ask her for proof. And when Regina gave the laylet to this woman, she just started crying, uncontrollably crying, and quickly packed it all up and she left. And she left and she didn't say a word. And afterwards, she came back a week later. And she said, sorry that I left without saying a thing, but I was so overwhelmed with joy and emotion that I was speechless. I couldn't say anything. But she came back and she thanked Regina, and she said that when she brought this laylet home to her family and she was showing the other kids and her husband, they were shocked. And her husband said, "Who gave this to you? How is this possible? Where did you get this from?" And he said, "Does this mean that kindness really exists?" And he was moved and ashamed by that. And he, from that moment, it's so emotional, these stories, from that moment, he decided that he would never drink again, and he never did. And from that, he felt the hope that that he could get a job, that he could do more for his family. And so that changed this family. That is, thank you. And so, right, it says here, this laylet rekindled the flame of hope and dispelled the shadows that had enveloped a poor, discouraged household. So this was that single flame, right, lit in the darkness. This is what true charity is about. It's really changing someone's life. And if we think about, right, if we had just given one piece of clothing, would that have had this impact on this family? And then there's over, I only brought a few, but there's over hundreds of these stories of how these laylets really changed people's lives. And so the next story begins with a lady who cleaned Regina's house. And this lady, she knew some people in need. And she told Regina, "Oh, there's this woman that I know that she really doesn't have anything and could use a laylet." And she said that the husband was ill, he was sick, and he was unemployed. And the lady, she worked washing clothes because that was the only money that they were able to make. So even like 8 months pregnant, she's washing clothes to make a little money for their family. And, but she was, devastated. Like, this is my life. Like, how am I going to make more? How am I going to sustain this? And so as she's washing clothes, as she's, doing this job, she's crying, she's miserable, she's like in despair of what to do with her life. And so Regina, of course, said, "Of course, bring her here and I will give her, or I'll give you a laylet to bring to her." But the woman said, "No, like I'd like to go there and meet Regina myself." So she goes there and Regina showed her all the pieces. And again, this shock, this overwhelming emotion came over her. And she left again without saying anything because she was so shocked. She left. And she almost started taking it quickly as if it was going to leave, as if it was going to vanish, right? As if that all of those things couldn't be real and it wasn't going to, if she took too long, it was going to vanish and it wasn't going to be hers anymore. So she quickly took everything and she went back. But then the cleaning lady, she came back and she said, "I'm so sorry that she left without saying anything. But you should see her now. When she got back to her neighborhood, to this, the slums, the very poor neighborhood, she said she acted like a crazy woman. She went around showing everyone all of these clothes that she had. She put them, on her head, all this basket of clothes, and she went around showing everyone, so excited, so happy about this. And she started to sing again. She was singing and going down the street, and everyone said, "What's this lady's crazy?" But because of that, she felt that hope rekindled in her. She felt that she could do more. And so even then, even though she was already washing clothes for a little bit of money, she started working more. She started getting the energy to, okay, let me do more so that I can, get electricity put in our house so that I can do more. And so from then she was rekindled to do more, to change her life, change the situation she was in. And so these little pieces of clothing seemed like a magical talisman that she never grew tired of looking at or caressing as if they were alive. So these simple pieces of clothing, they had that change in her, that she was like amazed by having that, amazed that it was hers, that she could have, that she could take home. And it gave her faith that when I have this child, everything's going to be all right. And the third story here that we have is about another woman who had already had her child, and there was other centers that donated clothes that helped families, but to bring her child to the center to be able to receive clothes, they required that the child come to prove that she was in need. But to bring the child there, she needed to clothe the child, and she literally had no clothes for her child. So it took her weeks. To get clothes, to be able to borrow clothes from another person, from her neighbor, to be able to put on the baby, to finally bring to the center to say, okay, I'm in need. Can you give me some supplies? And again, imagine the situation of this mother not having anything, not having a single outfit for this baby, and having to go there and be vulnerable and saying, I have nothing. And so she gets there to the center, and when she gets there, they said, oh no, the person that deals with the distribution, they're not available right now. They can't help you. And so they turn her away. They say, oh no, you'll have to come back another time. But she was already there that whole trip with the borrowed clothes. She didn't have another time to come back. And so someone seeing this and seeing this woman that didn't have, that was getting turned away, knew of Regina's project and said, you know what, let me try calling Regina. And at this point, it's past 10 o'clock at night, so it's very late. And they call Regina, and she says, of course, I have a laylet. This is exactly what it's for. Come here, and I'll give it to you. And so the woman goes there with the baby, right, because she had the baby. She goes there with the baby, and while Regina is getting the laylet together, the baby is crying and crying and crying. And she explains that she had to cut out some of the feedings for that day because she couldn't afford the formula that the doctor had recommended. So while they're getting the laylet together, Regina says, okay, let's also get a bottle. Let's also get some milk. Let's feed the baby as well. And so Regina not only clothed the baby, but she fed the baby, and the baby stopped crying and immediately fell asleep. And so while she was there holding the baby just looked up and smiled at her and went back to sleep. And then she was there talking with the woman for some more time, giving the laylet. And as they were about to leave, again, waking up from a dead sleep, the baby woke up again and smiled at her. And then once again, when they were finally leaving, at the gate of the house, the baby did the same thing. And this story is so interesting with the baby there because it shows that these laylets carry this magical charge because they truly do. They were made so lovingly and carefully that they carry the peaceful vibration of love. So even this child, this baby who didn't know what was happening, felt that love, felt that energy from Regina, from the Laylette, from everything that she was giving. So it's not only that these mothers, these parents were impacted by this, but so were the children, so were the babies that they'll never forget. Even if it seems, right, like they are babies and they won't know, we know with Spiritism that babies are spirits that are that have a past, that have a history, that are going through challenges for certain reasons. And they feel that as well. They can't express it, but they do feel that love and that kindness. And this Laylette is the Laylette that moved the grandfather. And desperately, a friend calls Regina saying, "Do you have any Laylettes? Because there's a woman here that her niece went to the hospital because she wasn't feeling well, and she ended up being in labor. And because of that situation, they didn't have any clothes. She didn't know she was pregnant. She didn't have any clothes. And so they couldn't leave the hospital unless the baby had something to wear." But on top of that, the aunt was very desperate because she said, but also, one thing is the clothes, but also because of this, the grandfather, the father of the girl, she had disowned her daughter for this situation. She said, she's not coming back here because this is disgraceful, because this was a young girl that now has a baby, and this was disgraceful to the family. And so the grandfather said, she doesn't come back here. And so the aunt not only is there with this young girl that now has a baby with no clothes, but also nowhere to go. And she did have a sister, but the sister was already living as a family of 6 in a 2-room house. Only 2 rooms in the entire house, already with 6 people. So the sister said, how do I take in 2 more? A child with her child. And so the family was really in despair. But Regina said, of course, we'll get the Laylette. And so the aunt went there to pick up the Laylette to bring to the hospital so the baby would have something to leave in. And as the aunt arrived, she again explained that, but where is she going to go? What are we going to do? Where are they going to live after this? After they leave the hospital, now what? And Regina said, try once more with the grandfather and show him this Laylette, show him these pieces. And so a few days later, they called to share the news that when the aunt went home and she brought the Laylette and she showed that grandfather, he was so moved by those items, again questioning how is this all for us? How is this given to us? Because they were living in a rough situation, and now he felt like his whole world has fallen apart with his daughter, doing what to him was so wrong. And from that, right, initially he wanted nothing to do with the Laylette. He was like, I don't want to see that. I don't care. But then once he saw it, he was so moved that he said, you're right, we can do this. If someone was this kind to me, I can be kind to my daughter. And from there, he let her come back into the house. And so when the daughter left the hospital, she went back to the grandfather, and they were able to start building this life together and working together. And he showed that compassion and that care. Because in that moment, right, he saw, if someone's so kind to me, I can do the same for my own daughter. And so, thus, a Laylette made with love helped resolve many things. Would a cheaply poured made Laylette have triggered this transformative process? So, right, not only did this give the daughter, the baby clothes that the baby needed, everything, right, diapers, they didn't have anything, gave everything that the baby needed. This also brought peace to the aunt, to the sister, to the daughter, and to the grandfather, showing him, opening his heart to this kindness. And, going back to that question, if we just bought these in bulk and we were just giving people a few pieces, would that have made this change? Would that have transformed this family in such a way that now they were united, now they were working together? And that was the impact of doing these, creating these high quality laylettes, is that people saw, wow, this is really for me. And that changed their reality. And this one is the story of the baby in the chicken coop. And so word got to Regina about this young girl who had a baby, a 13-year-old girl who had a baby and was living in a chicken coop. And so the daughter, of course, from the situation was disowned for her family and left. And she had nothing. She had no job, nothing. She was a mere child herself. And so she actually almost had the baby on the streets if it wasn't for someone that ended up calling an ambulance to go to the hospital. And so she had nowhere to go. And this lady, this kind lady that she met, said, okay, I'm already taking care of so many kids. I'm already taking care of my grandkids, and I have so many kids that I'm already taking care of. But at night, you can sleep in here, and during the day, you can stay in the chicken coop. And so this girl was there, staying in the chicken coop, and at night, she would go inside into a corner of this lady's house to sleep inside. But again, didn't have much. So Regina, of course, said, okay, let's get her a laylet. And so she gets the laylet, and when the neighbor, the woman who owned the house, who was allowing the girl to stay in the chicken coop, when she saw all of that kindness, that love towards someone that this person, Regina, didn't even know this person, and she gave all that, her heart started to soften as well. And she was so moved by this that she decided to fully welcome the daughter into her house. She said, the girl into the house, you can come into the house, stay here, live in here, don't be out in the chicken coop. And on top of that, the neighbor, seeing this whole entire interaction of kindness, said, oh, I own a store down the street, and you can come work for me here. Because imagine this 13-year-old girl that had nothing. How was she going to get out of that situation? And so they created an arrangement that the girl could leave, could go to work, but then whenever she needed to feed the baby, she would come back to feed the baby, and created this amazing arrangement for her to start getting her life together, figuring out what she was going to do from this point out. So now she had somewhere to stay. The lady opened up her home to her and also had a job, so that from this point on, she can start creating something, because how would she ever get out of this situation? And what's really interesting that Regina says in this book that I really liked, it says, life is like that. Some are born into palaces, others into chicken coops. And it's really impactful to think about that, because as all of us, as we know, as we're spirits that are reincarnating, this is for something. There's something to learn from every situation that we're in, right? Some of us who are in palaces does not mean we're better than those that are born in the chicken coop. We are all working towards our own progress, and there's a reason for everything we go through. But if we're in the means that we're not in the chicken coop, we have a reason to help. We have a reason to help others to get out of these situations, because luckily our time right now is not in the chicken coop, and we can do more, and we can help those who unfortunately are in that situation right now. And then we get to the story of the laylet for the farmer's baby. And so there was a family that was living on her farm that the wife was about to have her 10th child. And she said, I don't have anything for this 10th child. And at this point, the farmer was not getting a lot of income. Their situation, their family was really bad, and also getting very ill. So they had very little to support these now 10 children that were coming. And so, of course, right, Regina found out about this, and Regina's neighbor came to her and said, I'm going to see this family. Can I bring a few yards of the material, of just the fabric? Can I just bring the fabric? And Regina said, okay, of course you can bring the fabric, but why don't you bring an entire laylet? And so the neighbor went and brought the laylet and some additional fabric. And once again, the woman was so moved, so touched, because she didn't ask for that. She didn't know that this was coming, and she was overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. And this laylet had such an impact that when she got to the hospital and they had this laylet and she explained the story, the nurses there also helped the family in different ways, helped the family to get medicine for the father, and helped the mother get additional surgeries that she needed. So that really, the hospital people, moved by this story, helped the family medically in ways that they couldn't have afforded before. And again, this gave her hope that, okay, this is my 10th child, but I can do this. We can support our family. We can move on from this. And what's so touching about this story is that when she had her baby, she came back, she got the extra fabric, and she gave it back. And she said, in her extreme poverty, she gave the most valuable gift. While some give from their surplus, she gave almost all she had. She gave that flannel back, and she said, there's definitely others who need this more than I do. She said, I already have a laylet. I don't need the extra fabric. There's others. And this woman had nothing. She had nothing for any of her 10 children, but she could recognize that there are others that need more than she does. And so this, right, is the true meaning of charity, of not giving just the surplus, the extra that we have. She had nothing, and she still was able to give that away. So to her, that fabric was everything. And she gave it because she knew that there's others that need that more than she does. And really that is what true charity is about. And lastly, the last story that Regina brings, although there are over hundreds of these stories of people impacted by these laylets, she brings a story of a woman who is going to have her second child. And the husband had just left her, and she was living with her mother, and again, had very little, had nothing to go off of. And she was feeling, how am I going to support another child? I don't have the means. And she was so desperate in that situation that she decided to give the baby to a wealthy woman. She said she didn't want to. She was in a moment of despair, and she said, if I can't provide a good life for my child, let me give it to someone who can. And so she was such in despair, but she still needed something, clothes for the hospital, for the baby. And Regina said, no, why don't you, gave the laylet, of course, and said, no, why don't you take the baby home first? Take the baby home with your laylet. And when she did that, she was still sure when she was in the hospital, I have to give this baby, because how am I going to be the one to take care of it? I can't even take care of our small family. How am I going to take care of another child? And she really wanted to give a better life. But when she came home with this laylet and with the baby, she felt that love, that kindness. She said, you know what? I can do this. We'll make it work. We'll be able to get by. And she ended up telling the woman, I'm sorry, but I am going to keep the baby. I am going to be able to provide the life that this child needs. And this shows us, all of these stories, that the mother, almost always in despair, who receives the impact of such a laylet, starts to believe in kindness again, feels hope being reborn, and becomes strengthened for the struggles ahead. So charity is much bigger than just giving. It's much bigger than giving a material thing, than giving money. While that's still important, right? Regina was giving a material thing, but the love and kindness behind that had the power to change these people's lives and continue to do so. And again, these are just a few stories of hundreds of the impact of these laylets. And in the end, right, it had that power to rekindle that flame of life. And so as we leave here today, going back to the initial message from Chico Xavier, from the Spirit Emmanuel, he encourages us to study observe, work, and renew yourself towards the good. Expand your vision and assist others while helping yourself. Remember that God gives his gift without measure. Thank you all so much for being here today with me. Prayer? Okay. And so now, with these thoughts of charity and love and kindness in our hearts, let us thank God for this opportunity that we have here to be together, studying, learning, bettering ourselves step by step by helping others. Allow us to realize the difference we can make in the lives of others and slowly change the world and rekindle the flame of life. And so be it. Thank you all.